Hi guys, this is Not a Cat. How are you? Back with another manga review / recommendation with Hideo Yamamoto's psychological horror gem Homunculus. This is something I felt compelled to talk about ever since I finished it because this really is some of the most intriguingly written and beautifully illustrated seinen I have read in a wee while. If you like dark, strange, engrossing tales but don't want to commit to something that has a million volumes, this is definitely for you. And in particular, if you like physically reading your manga rather than reading it online, this is a nice one to own. Homunculus comes in just 5 big, beautiful omnibuses. They're nice and chunky and they look really elegant on your shelf, but they look rather lovely on the inside as well. A few months after finishing it, I found myself just leafing through the pages just to look at the art, because Yamamoto is very talented at drawing both the real and the imagined. Now, about the narrative itself. Homunculus tells the story of a man called Nakoshi, a former businessman who is now homeless and living out of his car. We know very little about him as Nakoshi's attempts to hide himself from the world extend even to us, the reader. He's a strange guy, which always makes for good protagonist material, but not in a quirky way. He's deeply and sometimes off-puttingly bizarre. At times we might relate to him, his identity troubles and his isolation, and at other times his behaviour disgusts us. Yamamoto has made a brave choice here, I think, in exploring universal themes through a character we're not even guaranteed to like. And it pays off very well because Nakoshi has to ask himself what it means to be human. If we only write stories about the human condition through the perspective of safe and wholly likeable characters, we're not really doing that question justice. So I'm glad he's so repugnant at times. It makes for a better book. Anyway, with not much to do, Nakoshi frequents a park inhabited by other homeless men. That's the main place he hangs out, and he doesn't really seem to have a support system outside of this. Suffice to say, his life has already been turned upside down for reasons which are later revealed in this twist-rich story, and it's about to get turned upside down again by the enigmatic and fashionable Ito. Ito is a medical student rich kid with money and resources to spare, and he has a fascination with a certain speculative procedure that he needs a guinea pig for. You can probably guess who that guinea pig ends up being, and that's all I'll say about that. On the surface, Ito appears a lot more confident and exuberant and open than Nakoshi, but we soon learn that he has his own problems. And Nakoshi helps to tease these out in an unexpectedly surreal and bizarre fashion. Their evolving dynamic is definitely one of the highlights of this narrative. Homunculus is set in the real world and talks very confidently about real-world issues like class divides in modern Tokyo, mental illness, and the frightening malleability of one's own identity. However, this is first and foremost a psychological horror, with elements of body horror too. These are my 2 favourite horror subgenres, and Yamamoto is clearly a seasoned professional in this realm. You'll know this, of course, if you've read his most famous work, Ichi the Killer. Both Ichi the Killer and Homunculus deal with physical and psychological mutilation in different ways. Ichi the Killer is extremely violent and visceral, while Homunculus is more cerebral and metaphorical. This is its strength though. It doesn't dazzle you with brutality, but rather uses horror to delve into psychologically complex issues. Now onto the art. I said this manga is beautifully illustrated, and I do mean that. The shading and use of empty space are accomplished, and Yamamoto gives us some really nice line work too. He's adept at hatching and cross-hatching, and wow, can this man draw hair when he wants to. Nakoshi has a lovely head of hair on him when it's not being hidden by his beanie. He's a good-looking guy, but his handsomeness is not incidental, but rather thematically important. The narrative cleverly utilizes his handsomeness to encourage us to trust him as a narrator, and then asks us to ask ourselves why. How do good looks function as a currency in modern society, and how closely does one's outer appearance reflect one's inner life? These are all ideas that the story and the art explore rather wonderfully. There's a realism to Yamamoto's style, but he's also extremely adept at drawing the illusory or manipulating the real. I think a lot of the time people assume that surreal means wacky or strange, which is understandable. However, if you look at the original French, the word actually refers to a world or a realm beyond or above the real. It's the world that you recognize, only warped, as if you were in a dream. And Yamamoto understands how to present this to the utmost effect. Great surreal art requires a knowledge of how to draw the natural and the unnatural too. Yamamoto is good at drawing water, fish, things like that. He draws a nice cat too, but the way that he presents the dark man-made city environment is very effective as well. We can see and smell and feel the city, and he wants us to feel like that. He wants us to feel the weight of the city's expectations on its inhabitants, just as Nikoshi does. The city is a place where we are constantly viewed, constantly on display, but rarely feel seen. And Homunculus does a wonderful job in exploring the painful human desire to be seen for what or who we truly are, if that is even possible. I do have one criticism of Homunculus, and it would be disingenuous of me not to mention it here, and that would be that I feel like the ending happens a little too fast. Don't get me wrong, the story is great, the ending doesn't drag it down, and it's a thematically appropriate ending which is by no means boring. However, I believe that Yamamoto would have done well to spend a little bit more time on the preamble up to the ending just to smooth out the pacing a little bit more, because in general, this is a really well-paced story that unravels things in due course. You can decide for yourself though. I mean, if you've read it and you think the ending is perfect, let me know in the comments, because the more I think about it, I guess I can't really think of any other way the story could have ended, even if at the time I wanted more. Maybe I made the mistake of reading too quickly. This is not a dialogue-heavy manga by any means, and if you're not careful, you can kind of rush through it without giving it the time that it deserves. So if you do buy this book, make sure that you take the time to pore over the art and pore over the questions that it asks you, and you'll get the most out of it that way. This is a manga I recommend to almost everyone I talk about it to. It's a story which confronts you with some ugly stuff, but never becomes difficult or too detached from reality. Someone described it to me as cozy, in fact, and I kind of have to agree with her. All things considered, it was a relaxing read. There's something sort of sleepy about the dark city environment, which is nice to curl up and envelop yourself in at the end of the day. There's something really special about the balance of relaxing and disturbing and surreal, which is, I don't know, it's a real gem when you find something like that that does that balance really well, and if you've read the book, you'll know what I mean. If you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on this bizarre tale, do let me know, and if this review helped you decide whether or not to read Homunculus yourself, definitely leave a comment, as that would make me really happy. I'm gonna get back to editing Vegeta's Humanity Part 3, which is still in production as of today. By the time you watch this, it might be out already, who knows? But I've got about 40 minutes of finished footage for that. That's really hard to say, finished footage. And I'm really pleased with how it's turning out, so I hope to see you there when it comes out. For now guys, I hope you have a lovely day. If you like this video, please give it a little like, let me know that you liked it, and most importantly, take care of yourselves. Ciao!